Okay, don't get your breeches in a bundle. I hear your criticisms, and I gotta say, I feel kinda stupid. Seeing basically every example QRack design be vertically oriented should have activated the why is that like that, let me investigate this further part of my brain. But apparently that part of my brain was on vacation that day. However, hear me out for a sec. You know all those warped wood boards you see at hardware stores? Those are all unfinished, cheap, heavy pieces of wood being kept in an environment where the temperature and humidity is always changing. This Q rack is in a climate controlled environment. The Qs themselves are nicely finished, good pieces of wood, so they're resistant to moisture. They're also pretty light. Now, with all of that in mind, by my back of my hand calculation, these Qs on my Q rack won't become unusably warped for at least 11 years. Now, I'm not saying the Qs will never warp. They probably will. All this was just me trying to retroactively convince myself that I didn't waste a week of my life doing something that wasn't a good idea in the first place. If you couldn't tell, I've had a bit of a wardrobe change. My parents watched my last video and determined I needed a new sweatshirt, so they got me this one for Christmas. They also determined from that video that I needed a drill press, so they got me this for Christmas too. They even built a rolling cart for it to go on. Now I have everything I needed to build my bad idea from 42 months ago. Perfect timing. So now that I'm contractually obligated by my parents to actually use this thing, let me kill two birds with one stone and use this time to fulfill another obligation I contracted myself into. I might make a separate video going into a more thorough breakdown / analysis of this old Tony's visual style and why I chose him over other equally entertaining DIY channels. Let me amend that last bit, as I think I painted with too wide a brush there. When I said DIY channels, what I really should have said was tradesman channels. You know the kind. Manly men, and sometimes women, who show you their process of constructing something out of wood or metal or what have you, using tools and materials that most people probably don't have direct access to, myself included. Well, I guess not anymore. Those are the channels I'm going to be talking about here. I feel like the more arts and crafts side of DIY channels is its own separate world, and so deserves its own separate video breaking them down. I mean, technically the woodworking, metalworking, etc. sides of YouTube are their own separate worlds too, but their videos are made by the same ilk with similar tastes, so I think it's fair to bundle them together. Heck, there are some channels that kind of fall between those extremes and might deserve their own video analyses, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I gotta be honest, overall, the tradesman world of YouTube is kind of bland. From a video production / filmmaking standpoint, I mean. I still find the videos thoroughly entertaining just as they are, as do several other people. However, the visual language of most of these videos is pretty rudimentary. 95% of tradesman videos are just wide-angle shots of people in their workshop talking to a camera set at head or chest height on a tripod, intercut with closer shots of the work, lots of flat, even lighting, and sometimes with royalty-free music playing. Although to be fair, that is 95% of all YouTube channels, but I think one reason why tradesman channels tend to do that is the target demographic. From what I can gather, most of their viewers just want to see the no-nonsense build process of projects they find interesting and or might want to try themselves. They don't necessarily care about the video quality or any kind of clever or flashy camera work or editing skills that younger viewers, me included, have come to appreciate. And you know what? Chicken butt. I don't blame them. Every time I look up a YouTube tutorial, without fail, I look at the video's length first and then the view count before I even consider watching it. Raise your hand if you do the same. Now, I can't see any of you raising your hands, but I am just going to assume that all of you watching this did in order to validate my point. Any good tutorial / build video should only ever be as long as necessary to convey the information required to accomplish the promised task. Because most people looking up tutorial videos are looking for quick solutions for either problems or project ideas. Okay, maybe that isn't a hard and fast rule. There are plenty of excellent and entertaining long-form tutorial / build videos with more than their fair share of fluff. But the collective ideal for these types of videos tends to favor concision over entertainment value. So employing a simple, straightforward, and quick approach to the cinematography is thematically appropriate and actually works to their benefit. Although, very few things exist in a vacuum. Basically every clip I've seen of YouTubers explaining why they got into YouTubing includes them talking about being inspired to do it after watching someone else do something similar. So when it comes to making videos, these tradesmen YouTubers are probably drawing inspiration from somewhere, right?
Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome to this old house. As you can see, work is underway.
Hello again. Welcome back to the Woodwright Shop. My name is Roy Underhill.
I think I'm going to use some red oak because it's that hard wood that can take all the abuse that cabinet's going to get while it's being used.
So the answer to that question is, of course, yes, because everything's been done before and nothing is original. This actually makes a lot of sense if you consider most of the creators behind these channels seem to be of an older generation. I'm sure most of them either watched those shows as working professionals or grew up watching them and got into trades because of that. And the same might go for the younger generation of these channels as well, as some of those shows are still on the air with more than a few newer clones. I'm certain most tradesmen YouTubers have not actually thought through the artistic reasonings for why they composed a shot a certain way. Only a crazy person would do that. So this style of videos is probably just what tradesmen YouTubers were used to seeing, and so just mimicked that style as best they could when they got started. Now the most obvious difference between TV shows and YouTube channels is production scale. TV shows have camera crews, sound crews, lighting crews, caterers, set designers, makeup artists, wardrobe departments, graphic artists, editors, directors, producers, and unpaid interns to distribute the workload so the on-screen talent can focus on presenting what they're good at. YouTubers have to wear all of those hats. And I think tradespeople in particular are keenly aware of the cost of putting in more work than necessary to complete a project. Well, in theory, I guess. So it makes sense that they'd have to chamfer a few creative corners in order to get videos done in a timely manner. However, that's one advantage YouTube has over television: time. TV shows have to adhere to strict schedules and time slot limitations, and as such end up cutting out most of what they film. Not a lot of room for funny business, although some of those shows I showed earlier are still padded with emotional fluff. YouTube videos have no such restrictions. They can be as short or long as necessary and can go on air whenever the creator chooses. They don't need to be censored through the lens of TV executives or ratings boards. And they don't need you to stay emotionally invested through to the next commercial break. So with all that working in their favor, you'd think tradesman YouTubers would have a bit more fun with the video creation side of their channels, right? After all, making videos is itself just as much an art form as the projects they showcase. Even channels with unmistakably larger production, multiple cameras and camera operators, properly lit set, and audio cleaner than a baby's bum, end up looking like clones of their TV show counterparts. But I've already laid out a bundle of rationales for why they don't tend to hone their video making skills beyond that. However, there are outliers. And there is one creator that I think stands out from the crowd of other tradesman channels when it comes to video production. And if you're already familiar with YouTube Tradesman or saw my previous video, then you already know who I'm talking about.
Hi. So I turned this piece of cherry about 2.5 years ago.
I was actually seriously considering emulating Frank Howarth in my last video. For a couple of reasons. One, the way I speak off camera is awfully similar to the inflection and pacing in Frank's voice. So mimicking that would have been a piece of park, or a walk in the cake. Reason the second, I was doing a primarily woodworking project, so it would have made sense to mimic Frank over a machining channel. However, there were a couple of things holding me back from mimicking Frank. One hurdle was recreating the 3D animations Frank has become known for. I'm definitely not against learning a new skill, but this whole idea of me doing a video series dissecting YouTubers' filmmaking styles was kind of done on a whim. So, knowing my own shortcomings, I'd have likely lost interest while spending a few weeks learning how to do something that would maybe get 30 seconds of screen time. But when has that ever stopped me? The same thing goes for the stop-motion animations Frank is also known for, if not doubly so. Now, I've tried to do stop-motion before, and it is... His 3D animations remind me a lot of the exploded diagrams you see in a lot of DIY project books. Same thing goes with the photos of the finished projects. These books are another possible visual inspiration for other tradesman YouTubers, though maybe not necessarily in Frank's case, since his 3D models come from his architecture background. And white void backdrops are the bread and butter of all product photography. Speaking of photography, Frank clearly cares about his camera work. Not only does he have more than a few videos detailing his shooting process and even building rigs for getting specific shots, he's also clearly a bit of a camera gear nut. Getting shots with blurry backgrounds is hard to get with lenses with small maximum apertures, especially at wide angles, and Frank has definitely paid for the better glass to get that look. More recently, Frank's been uploading in 4K, so he's clearly keen on investing in better gear as he sees fit. Frank also clearly has fun with the editing and visual gags to keep things interesting for the viewers that appreciate them. Now, as much as I've gushed over Frank's videos, I still have some critiques that place him at only second in my best YouTube tradesman video creator cook-off. While I love a good bokeh-licious background as much as Tony Northrup, you still need to make sure the focus of your shot is, well, in focus. And if your lens's aperture is huge, it can be easy to literally lose sight of what's important. Take this shot, for instance. At the end of the clip, we see the focus is on the saw blade, but for most of the shot, it's in motion. And the depth of field is so razor thin that for most of this 35-second shot, the only thing appreciably in focus is some motes of sawdust. I get going for an artsy look, but my myopia doesn't even look this bad. To Frank's credit, he has gotten better with this over time. One other minor critique I have for Frank is his lighting. Although he does sometimes bring out stand lights to light a shot, 95% of the time he just uses the fluorescent and natural lighting in his shop, resulting in the same flat lighting that every other YouTube tradesman channel employs. Huh. Now, like I said before, that lighting setup is far from a bad thing. It's a tried and true illumination method that's fairly easy to obtain and works for basically every shot type and type of video. But I don't want universality. Dang it. I'm looking for the best of the best of the best. Sir. I mean, I have a reputation to uphold here. A reputation that I have not yet established. There is one tradesman YouTuber that I feel goes above and beyond the rest. They take all of the best qualities of every other YouTube tradesman videos and kicks them up to the 11th notch, while also heightening the entertainment value. Are you ready for the dramatic reveal? What? Who are you expecting? Den of Tools?
Where they are, where they're supposed to be, which is great. However, I will say this, that kind of injury is not the number one injury you see.
Why is there a bear talking to me about table saw? As I did in the last video, I've been copying this old Tony's video style this whole time. And there's a lot going on here that goes against the grain of other tradesman channels. For starters, Tony never shows us his face. Well, okay, he did show his face once, but everyone was so traumatized that he pinky swore he'd never do it again. A lot of times when YouTubers choose not to show their face on camera, they do it to preserve their online anonymity. Maybe that was the case for Tony at first, but Tony doesn't seem to have a problem with that, so he's choosing not to show his face for a different reason. It could just be because most of the projects he works on are fairly small, and the process of machining them isn't really conducive to having his face in the frame. Having vital body parts near spinning metal doodads isn't the smartest idea. Extremely dangerous. But hold on a sec. Even in wide-angle shots where his extremities are safe and sound, Tony still doesn't show his face. When I filmed my last video, I remember having to reframe wide shots because I accidentally showed my face. Tony seems to go out of his way to keep his face out of frame, so what gives? Humans are social animals, and because of that we like faces. So much so that we see faces in places they ought not be. Many YouTubers thrive off of their personalities and/or interesting lives, and showing their face seems to be an important part of that. Now, it is absolutely possible to get a sense of their personalities without ever showing their face. This isn't as big a deal for tradesman YouTubers, since the emphasis of their videos is the projects they make, not them and their personalities. Well, ideally, I guess. But when you see them working on a project in one of their videos, you can't always help but look at their face, even if they aren't talking, or even in focus for that matter. And Tony understands this. He composes his shots with only the essential elements in frame, so your eyes are forced to focus on only those few objects. Now, I'm not basing that assertion on my pretend degree in psychology, but I am basing that on my very real degree in artology. I don't know the extent of Tony's artistic education, but he is aware of certain design principles and has demonstrated he has a solid understanding of composition.
The golden ratio is a magical proportion. People used to think made things look good if you stuck to it. Personally, I think it's a bunch of hooey, but
despite saying that, Tony's framing does tend to follow the golden ratio. He's also not afraid to use Dutch angles when necessary, sometimes to comically extreme degrees. Tony also makes extensive use of leading lines. Lots and lots and lots of leading lines. Were you a Baroque painter in your former life, Tony? Some of his shots literally look like modern still lifes. Heck, this one's even got a memento mori. He spent God knows how much time just to set up this single 4-second shot. Overachieved. That definitely wasn't an accident. Another thing that definitely wasn't an accident is Tony's use of lighting. Early on in his YouTube tenure, Tony's videos had the same flat, fluorescent lighting that every other tradesman channel seems to stick with. But around 2016, 2017, Tony started taking his videos lighting in a different direction. That is to say, he uses directional lighting, or to be artsy-fartsy, a modified version of chiaroscuro lighting. Well, okay, not all of his shots are exactly chiaroscuro. Technically for chiaroscuro you need like a single light source from like a window or a cellar opening or whatever. And when I say directional lighting, I don't necessarily mean lighting from one specific direction, although that's usually what it's meant to describe. What I'm talking about is how the lighting of the scene itself directs your eye to look at certain points in the frame. The way Tony does this is sometimes with one, but oftentimes with 2-point lighting setups in order to sort of mold the scene. If you have the option, the way you light a scene is sometimes a better way to separate the subject/foreground from the background than having a shallow depth of field. Now, I don't know about y'all, but with flat lighting, my eyes tend to wander around the frame to look at other things that aren't the obvious focus of the shot, even if the background is blurred to Kingdom Come. I'm kind of like a dog, I get distracted easily. Wait, what was I talking about? Tony's lighting design at least partially solves that distraction issue by only having the essential elements lit and having everything else mostly in the shadow. Now I know movement and color and a whole bunch of other things play a big part in where you look in a shot, but that's a whole other can of worms that other people have done much better videos about than I ever could. That high contrast lighting style Tony uses reminds me of those ye old-timey training films.
Back of the pin automatically locates the starting point for the next 1 1/9 of a turn.
If I start in that hole, I can take a cut, retract the pin, move 8 holes, and drop it in that last hole.
Tony's clearly aware of the history of tradesman films and TV shows. He's parodied those training videos before, and his channel name is a direct reference to This Old House. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tony was directly influenced by the style of those old films. Now that high contrast lighting look was probably just a result of the cheap film stock those old films were shot on, but the lighting in Tony's videos is only getting more contrasty as time goes on. And the presentation style of those films seems unintentionally cheesy by today's standards.
With full confidence that they will fit and function perfectly. This is possible only because of modern machine methods. The tapered shaft is an important...
I mean, Tony's videos can be cheesy too.
Great. I thought you and I could bring a new one into the world. Together. All right, I'm sorry. I'm being a little cheeky.
But the key difference is Tony is being cheesy on purpose. Okay, I'm starting to get a bunch of texts from ClickSpring stands about why I didn't choose Chris for the best YouTube tradesman video creator cook-off. And I totally understand. How did you all get my number? Chris and Tony are exceptionally similar since they're both machining channels and they don't show their face. Make no mistake, Chris's cinematography, lighting, and editing skills are top-notch, no doubt an extension of his exceptional craftsmanship. However, much like Chris's approach to his shop projects, his video production is kinda by the book. His voiceover narration and precise presentation style makes his videos feel like a prettier and more refined episode of How It's Made. Again, in Chris's case, that's actually a good thing. Everybody loves How It's Made.
That show, How It's Made.
One of the best shows in television.
His favorite show.
I could very easily see Chris getting his own legit TV show without changing much about his video production. Make It Extreme and Alex Steele have a similar aesthetic. Their videos look like How It's Made a la Forged in Fire, minus the forced reality show competition elements. Heck, some tradesman YouTubers actually have their own TV shows. However, I think Tony's videos work better creatively because they couldn't live on television. Probably. Maybe. I don't know. I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. Point is, Tony seems aware that his content is really only meant for an online audience. Internet content in general works best when it's wacky and weird and experimental. And a lot of that comes from being able to find humor in unexpected places, visual/audio gags, and clever editing. TV shows that aren't strictly comedy-based don't usually take those creative risks because of the time, budgetary, and bureaucratic restraints I talked about earlier. Now, since humor is very subjective, I won't go into why I like Tony's humor. I guess you either get it or you don't. But if you have seen Tony's videos and you don't like his sense of humor, I totally respect your opinion, but I strongly urge you to go back through his videos and re-examine why exactly you're wrong. Now I guess I should go into the process of how I actually made this and the last video for the pi% of you that actually care. Though my poor memory is working against me, and I can't remember how all of this started. Hold on, let me check the script. Oh yeah, I wrote a script first. The previous video was kinda half scripted. The introduction and conclusion were loosely written, but most of the build process commentary was off the cuff. That worked out pretty well, as it left me some breathing room for when I inevitably messed up during the build. Now, I have no way of knowing, but this is how I imagine Tony does his videos. His commentary, while informal in tone, has a certain flow to it. Now, he does tend to go on tangents, and you might think he's gratuitously padding his videos for the sake of entertainment. And to that, I'd say, you're right. But you can tell that Tony's fluff is purposeful fluff. This is a critique I have of most other tradesman YouTubers. The way they speak is also mostly informal, but you can kind of tell by their inflection and pacing that they're probably just speaking off the top of their head. I feel like if you make videos outlining the process of building something with a clear order of operations, it makes sense that whatever commentary you do should reflect that.
Does that make sense?
Now, I'm not saying those other tradesman YouTubers don't think about what to say before hitting record. I'm sure they do. But I imagine tradesmen in particular are the type of people who can appreciate that a little more planning up front goes a long way. Now, there are countless YouTubers who find success by verbally shooting from the hip. Some are just naturally better at it than others. But even if you're bad at speaking off the cuff, you can make yourself sound more focused with editing. Make you sound like you actually know what you're talking about. It's certainly been the boon of my YouTube existence. Tony definitely understands this too.
Stuff working against me here. First, there's the whole not knowing what I'm doing thing. There are some really good mechanics out there. I'm not one of those. Like any good YouTuber trying to make you think they know what they're doing, I sat down and watched some videos beforehand.
And Frank Howarth understands the importance of editing your dialogue better than most.
Now I have a stutter.
So that's why for this video I took the time to write everything out. Mostly so my completely unnecessary analysis of YouTube tradesman channels would flow better, but also because the process of building this shelf was pretty simple and self-explanatory. I figured you all could follow along without me holding your hand, and I could get this finished without any hiccups. Will my hubris get the best of me this time? The world may never know. Which brings
Me to cameras. Now, I could talk about cameras forever, so I will.
man after my own heart. I've used more than a few cameras since I started making videos. Started with a Canon T1i, which quite frankly sucks as a video camera. It has virtually no video controls, no articulating screen, and it only records HD at 20 FPS, which is a weirdo low frame rate. I only ever used it because it was all I had at the time. I upgraded to the Panasonic G85. I actually have two of them. Better controls for video, articulating screen and all that, and it's also a decent photo camera. The camera I shoot with nowadays is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 18. More professional controls, better in low light, and the image quality is hard to beat for its price. Now, 4K here is complete overkill for this type of video. Honestly, I probably should have just shot it with the G85. Very few people need a raw, capable video camera, but I guess I'm a masochist for color grading. Coincidentally, I also have the exact same camera that Tony uses to shoot his videos, the Nikon
D300S.
Well, okay, he doesn't shoot video with this camera anymore. Nowadays, he uses a
D500. It's the upgrade to this camera that I've been waiting for. But anyway,
I briefly contemplating using this camera to shoot at least some of the last video to get an authentic retro this old Tony aesthetic. But I decided against that for a few reasons. One, as Tony so eloquently puts it,
Nikon DSLRs in general suck at video.
Second, this camera came from my old job at a portrait photography studio, and having gone through the trials and tribulations of getting screaming toddlers to smile naturally on cue, I don't know. Being reminded of that makes me want to shudder. And 3, I can't even turn the camera on because I have no idea where the battery charger for this is anymore. Tony has certainly dropped a lot of dough on pro camera gear. I'm sure he wouldn't have bought that camera equipment without at least intermediate photography experience. That said, Tony himself will be the first to admit that the
Camera you use, I don't think is very important. And what I mean by that is if you actually had good lighting, the camera you have in your phone is probably more than sufficient, for YouTube.
And I agree with that for the most part. And thanks for that segue, alley-oop. With more photography experience, you'll end up investing in your own lighting equipment. And Tony has made a few videos about modifying his own. You can't really use a flash bulb for video. Well, okay, you can put it on a continuous mode. Otherwise, in flash mode for videos, you'd have a Porygon situation on your hands. Point is, there are better lighting options for video production than using photography lights. And Tony understands this. Through rigorous examination of the nature of the light in his videos, I've deduced that Tony uses at least 2 LED panels to light his videos, with barn doors to cut the light as needed. And by rigorous examination, I mean I saw those very lights in a reflection. I also have 2 LED panels that I use for my videos. I'm using the other one right now to help light this scene coming from this direction. The backlighting you see is just from can lights in the ceiling in the basement. But I didn't end up using my LED panels for most of the shots in my last video, mainly because I was working in close quarters with not a lot of space to put these on a light stand. I mostly used these work lights, just mounted them wherever I needed to get the shot right, and used the ceiling can lights for the basement shots. For this video, I relied mainly on my LED panels for lighting, and would occasionally use these guys just to fill in light if I needed to.
Anyway, I was saying I think the audio is much more important than the video. In general, I think it's safe to say that people will put up with poor quality video and less likely to put up with even 4K ultra video if it has bad sound quality.
Oh right, I almost forgot. Thanks for keeping me on track, Tony. I actually also have the same Rode VideoMic Pro Tony uses, and I used it for quite a few shots in the last video. But in Tony's current videos, his voice sounds bassier than what I know this mic can usually produce. So either he's Mark Felting this mic in every video to take advantage of the proximity effect, or he's using a lavalier mic like this. And wouldn't you know it? You thought you could hide that from me, cheeky bastard. So yeah, if you're not in a studio environment, need to talk to the camera, and it doesn't matter if the mic is visible in the shot, just use a lav mic. Your audience will thank you. Now I did some more sleuthing and noticed the font Tony uses the majority of the time is Myriad Pro Condensed Bold. And the Myriad font family belongs to the Adobe dynasty. As such, I've deduced that Tony uses Premiere to edit his videos. Okay, I guess I could have avoided all that bit of research just by letting Tony tell me that.
I use Adobe Premiere Elements.
But I wanted my own Sherlock Holmes moment, so let me be. Man, if I had just let Tony do all the talking, I could have saved myself 6 minutes. Now I do have Premiere Pro, or at least access to Premiere Pro, but I edited this and the last video with DaVinci Resolve Studio, the editing software that comes included with every Blackmagic camera. There's nothing wrong with Premiere and the rest of the Adobe clan, but I've found that I personally like using DaVinci Resolve more. I just had to download the Myriad Pro font to match Tony. Now with all this talk of what software he uses, for Tony's videos, the editor he uses doesn't really matter. Heck, Tony started
off with Windows Movie Maker. It was probably fine for what I'm doing.
Most of the editing magic comes from basic jump cuts and resizing for visual gags, trimming and retiming to keep the pacing snappy, and him knowing when to cut for comedic timing. I mean, I guess that's the case for every video creator, but point is, you can do all that with basically any NLE. But one editing element that's relatively unique to Tony is his use of hand-drawn graphic overlays of his machining diagrams, no doubt inspired by the diagrams from the Machinist's Handbook he references frequently. Another possible visual inspiration for his videos as well. I know that Tony uses Sketchbook from Autodesk, so I imagine he traces over still frames and animates the SVG file in Premiere.
What are SVG files, you may ask? I have no idea.
I certainly could have done the same thing in the last video, since I have access to Adobe Illustrator, but I just used the drawing features already in DaVinci Resolve, purely for convenience. It eliminates an extra step. If I had to redo that, I'd have done it the way Tony does, since Resolve's drawing features, while convenient, are a bit too basic. There's no option for variable width line strokes to get that hand-drawn feel. To all the Blackmagic developers down under that are probably not watching this, that'd be a pretty sweet feature to add in version 18. If you can't tell, I'm winking at you guys. Alright, I'm almost done dissecting this frog. Just a couple of small points before I wrap this all up. I thought I was pushing it with my last video, since Tony's videos usually don't go over 30 minutes, but not long after I uploaded my video, he uploaded a feature-length film. So I guess he's just as susceptible to expositing as I am. You'll notice I haven't said anything about Tony's use of music in his videos. And that's because lately, Tony's actually been using less music, which I honestly think is a good thing, because I don't think his videos really need the music. Most of the time, he just uses royalty-free music during his intros, and occasionally during a montage. Though whenever he does use music, he is pretty careful about what he chooses. Most of what he chooses is this kind of quirky music that definitely fits with the tone of his entire channel. But beyond that, since Tony doesn't seem to pay too much attention to that, I didn't really bother either. Now, to all the other tradesmen YouTubers that might be watching this, I don't want your takeaway from this video to be that I don't like your videos or I think that you should change what you do. On the contrary, keep doing what you're doing. I have a deep appreciation for all the hard work you people put into your content, regardless of video production skills. And your subscriber counts should surely reflect that hard work as well. But if you're new to making YouTube videos and you're thinking about making tradesman style videos, then hopefully you found this video informative, if not at least entertaining, about what to think about before hitting record. And lastly, here's Optimus to act as a teaser for a future In the Vein Of video. Thanks for watching.